Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to Search Joe Blogs. And we'll go around the room and everyone will introduce themselves on the presenter screen.
I'm Tim Sheed. I've been helping Joe with Search London for 7 years. I think everybody knows me. Everybody knows you.
Yeah, and tonight we're celebrating our 10-year birthday. So thank you, everyone, for supporting us. And we'll be having a quiz tonight in my presentation at 7 p.m. And also anyone that has taken part in the Twitter competition and LinkedIn, we will pick a winner. And I'll pass over to Tom, who was one of our first speakers. Tom, do you want to do a brief intro before we delve into your talk?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tom, and I work at Found as a business director. Previously, I've worked in SEO for around 6 years, and more recently looking at kind of broader digital strategy for our clients at Found.
Perfect.
So, yeah, I'll share my screen.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So tonight's lineup, just in case everyone hasn't seen the agenda, it's a bit hidden. We'll have Tom give a great presentation about migrations, how to achieve a great migration for those websites. Then we'll have some Q&A and then networking. And then we also have Bidnamic, our sponsor as well tonight. So Tom is from Found and they are our sponsor. And Bidnamic will have Ingvar Krat, so he's just joined us.
Sorry, I wasn't quite sure whether you wanted me to jump in here right away now.
Yeah, you can say hi, yeah. And Ingvar will talk at 6:15. Then we'll have more networking, and then I'll give a presentation with a quiz that everybody, I'm sure, will know the answers to, but you can win a birthday treat at 7. And then we'll close at 8 p.m. So please network, please use the chat, use the Q&A, network as if you would in a pub, just without obviously going to the pub.
Cool. Okay, so today I want to be talking about migration success, and it's less around kind of the technical side of migration and more around some of the things that I've learned that you can use to improve the performance post-migration for your site. So what we're going to go through is a brief migration intro, why is SEO key to migration success, how to create a united team, realizing potential for growth, and removing guesswork from migration. And I've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to be quite quick with it as well, hopefully. So migration types here on the screen. So we've got examples of types of migration you can have for your site. So there's quite a few SEOs here, so I know that some of you know this. But you've got, for example, when you move from an old domain to a new domain, maybe if you're changing brand name and you're moving domains, if you're changing your product URL structure, you might be moving from like a subfolder URL structure for products to a root structure for your product URLs. You've got international migrations, whereby you might have lots of different sites, all targeting different regions across different domains. And you might be moving all of those to a global site with international subfolders. And then you've got the option at the bottom, which you might not want to deal with, where you've got multiple types of migration in one, moving to a completely new domain. And this poses potential risk because with every migration, there's a level of risk. And if there's multiple types of migration, that level of risk is increased. So what's the migration process? A pretty standard migration process would be planning, working out what tech you're going to use, planning out your roadmap, working out goals and objectives, moving into pre-migration. For the pre-migration, you're going to be working out what best practice you'd be putting into place across the site, and how do you ensure that you retain the value of your existing site when you migrate across. Then there's the staging side of things. So the developers have built the site, it's in a staging environment, and it's your chance to go in, assess the staging site and work out, has your best practice been followed, and are there any risks to performance upon launch? So site launches, everything hopefully goes well, and then you move into a pretty intense phase of analysis, whereby you're checking performance and making sure that if anything's dropped, you're picking up on it, and basically just checking that everything's gone correctly, and that your site continues to drive revenue or leads or whatever it is your site does. So today we're going to focus mainly on these stages, so the planning and pre-migration phases, And mainly on these kinds, the reason being is just that these kinds of migration, in my experience, have tended to be the ones where there's the most resource available, and therefore there's the biggest opportunity for growth with some of the tactics that we're going to talk about. So is SEO crucial for migration success? And this is a quote from the ASOS CTO. He's basically saying that they were going to make lots of UX changes to the ASOS website to improve the site for their younger audience, which sounded quite ambitious. So how did it go? This is their organic visibility. Not the best. So they made a lot of UX changes that sought to improve the kind of conversion rate of their site and improve engagement from their audience. But what they failed to do was pay attention to some pretty core SEO fundamentals. And as a result, they saw big drops in performance. So they did everything from not redirecting their top priority category pages through to kind of blocking Googlebot at one point. And it lost them about 80% of their organic visibility and almost certainly a lot of organic traffic and revenue as well as a result. But they're recovering, so you can see there's been a few core updates, and they've mostly recovered up until recently when they were hit quite severely. So I guess things aren't final when it comes to losing performance post-migration. So when you hear the words that your clients decided to, or your teams decided to move to a different site because of insert reason, hopefully you also hear that they want to catch up with you on next steps from your side. And for me, this is when like the SEO planets have really kind of aligned, excuse the cheesy imagery there, but now's the time to get stuff done. So a lot of things are in place that aren't normally there. So you've got developer resource available and tech limitations have been removed, hopefully. SEO becomes a priority and senior stakeholders are engaged with you as well. The only caveat here is that with SEO becoming a priority, it might be upon you to make that happen, to show the stakeholders the data and make sure that people understand why it's important that SEO is a focus. So the first problem that you come across when you're undertaking a migration is there's many different teams working on it, and all of them have different objectives and tactics that they want to utilize and things they want to achieve. And it's all a bit complicated in terms of who wants what. So the first thing that I like to do with a migration is to define with the stakeholders what are the KPIs that we're driving for with this migration. So what we're trying to achieve. And then you can take all of the team's objectives and goals and then validate them to see if they meet that KPI, if they're going to drive towards that KPI. And if they are, then it becomes a shared goal for you all to achieve together. And validation could be anything from if you want a site with lots of video content, someone's made a decision that perhaps you want lots of video on the page, perhaps the branding team, then if the developers can show you a site that they've built before that runs quickly with a lot of video content, then that validates your ability to do that. Or from an SEO perspective, perhaps it's showing an industry study whereby tabbed content doesn't perform well for organic rankings or something along those lines. So basically validating everything you're doing, showing that it's in line with the KPIs, and then creating kind of shared combined goals that everyone can drive towards. So one thing that I like to do to help with this, to help with kind of creating a team environment, is to create a codependent plan. So you can turn your SEO checklist into a combined Gantt chart for all teams to run from. And the reason that I chose Gantt charts, or I choose Gantt charts specifically for migrations, is primarily because it shows dependencies to all key team members. So you can see that if you're late on something, it's going to push everything else and delay that final migration point potentially. It also shows kind of all key players, the magnitude of tasks. Importantly for us as SEOs, it allows you to keep track of things that might impact organic performance. So really, this should be kind of checked on a weekly basis at least, I guess. And you can then see if something's been added, you can assess that and say, is that going to impact my performance at the other side? And should I pick up on it now? And finally, it allows you to understand everyone else's priorities, which is important when you're trying to get teams to work together to provide things. If someone's got a big deadline coming up in 2 days, it might not be the best time to ask the dev team to help you with a certain change you'd like to see across the site. So now I wanted to talk about the potential for growth, which we should be cautious around because there is always an associated risk with migrations. And as John Mueller said, here, we've all seen our share of migration horror stories. But I find that it's best to not just focus on retention across migration because of those things we discussed before, where there's a lot of resource available to help you push through things that you maybe previously were blocked on because there wasn't developer resource or there was limitations within the CMS, which is a pretty common problem. So this is an example of what we've done at Found. One of the examples here is this was a women's retail client, a women's fashion client, and we basically assessed their audience and identified the highest converting segments of that audience, and then saw that the product types that they bought were largely sizes 18 to 24. And then we used that audience-led data and combined it with search data, which was just kind of keyword research to identify, okay, how much demand is there around plus size clothing, and found that it was 400,000. So we combined their audience data with search data, showed this to the client, and said this is the available opportunity. We attached a conversion rate and revenue forecast to it, but the migration allowed us to implement this. What we saw was that we were able to drive incremental growth because these pages didn't exist before. We didn't really rank for these keywords before. And pretty much as soon as the migration went live, we saw an uplift in visibility just across these pages in these plus size subfolders. And that's the top graph there. And then the bottom graph shows the total visibility gain, of which these pages alone were 50% of that total growth. So it's great to be able to show incremental growth and then back this up with revenue data as well. So something that happens across migrations is that, especially, you get everyone in a room and then you start to talk about maybe page designs, and a lot of people have opinions on UX and how a page should look. And a tool that I like to use to avoid this is Google Optimize. It allows kind of 6 tests at a time on the free version, so it doesn't cost anything to use, just time to kind of set up the tests. You can A/B test landing pages, and then well in advance of your migration, you can test whether the page redesigns or whether the changes that are going to happen to navigation are going to positively or negatively impact your conversion rate. So it allows you to make decisions based on fact and data rather than on opinion. So I find it's quite a powerful tool for that. And here you can see this test page that we were testing drove double the conversion rate compared to the original. So it's a no-brainer there that we should push that page live across the new site. So finally, don't make things final. So make it, because there's always opportunity to recover performance, even if ASOS didn't do that particularly quickly here. So make it clear from the start that no decision should be final. Set up tracking well advanced of the migration. You want to be able to see where you're recommending new pages, new content, or new on-page optimization. That you want to be able to see the results of that very quickly post-migration, and you want to be able to compare it to your previous data set. Get automated alerts on performance drops is something that really helps. So in Slack, you can set up automated alerts that show you when KPIs drop within a certain percentage range or increase within a certain percentage range. And I'll actually use Content King as well, which allows you to track changes that can occur on the site. An example of this is clients have previously disallowed Googlebot in the robots.txt file, and you can set up alerts to spot this and then quickly act upon it. So finally, takeaways. SEO is crucial to any site migration. Create a team environment with shared goals and plans. Use data to validate your priorities and get stakeholder buy-in. Think about more than retention and plan for growth. Avoid decisions based on opinion, test and learn, and then changes which can impact performance should never be final. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom. That was wicked.
Thank you.
So we've there's a Q&A panel on the right-hand side of the chats facility. We should be on the right-hand side of your screens. So there's a couple of questions in there already. If anybody's got any burning questions for Tom, feel free to pop them in there. So I'll just run through the first couple that are in there, Tom. Would you recommend migrating all old or historic content? So, for example, news dating back to 2009. So, do you recommend moving over everything?
I recommend migrating. Sorry, echo back. I recommend migrating based on whether the content still receives traffic or whether there's link value going to that content. So say you had a piece from 2009 that had attracted a lot of external links, I'd recommend migrating that piece across. And maybe a good practice to do pre-migration is to look at older content that was performing well and work out whether it can be refreshed as part of the migration. So for example, I've got a client who do kind of outlooks on financial companies for every year, and we take that old content and update it and redirect it, and it generates more traffic, and the value of that content builds up over time. So no, I wouldn't recommend redirecting everything. Base it on performance and look to see if there's anything that you could update to get new performance from your existing content.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. And then what process do you run for testing prior to launch or prior to the migration?
Tools we use for testing, so we kind of have technical and content audits. So tech audits, we'd use tools like Deep Crawl and Screaming Frog and Sitebulb to find technical issues. And then for content audits, we'd use tools like GA to pull data on all of our old URLs. We use tools like Ahrefs to look at ranking performance and our existing ranking tracking tools. So I guess the process is really to assess all of the value that the site currently has in terms of all of the existing content, determine whether that's being brought across to the new domain, and then to assess all of the potential technical errors that could occur or have occurred in staging, and make sure that they're no longer there on the live site when the site goes live.
Cool. And what's the worst site migration you've had?
The worst site migration I've had.
Has anything gone wrong?
Well, the client blocking Googlebot because they had blocked it on their mobile subdomain way back when, and then that transferred across to the main site. They blocked Googlebot on the mobile subdomain, and then Google could no longer crawl the links that pointed to that subdomain, and then we lost a load of value from that. But we fortunately spotted it quickly. Yeah. It's the worst thing that's happened, I think.
Cool. And do you recommend migrating images and other assets, not just pages?
Yeah, definitely. I think migrating images is important, especially I think we had a travel client that used to get a lot of traffic for their images, and we migrated those along with the kind of HTTP content as well. HTML content, sorry.
Okay, cool. And any common issues going from HTTP to HTTPS?
I think the most common issue that I've seen with going from HTTP to HTTPS is not having relative, or it's not an issue, but a way to avoid the issue is to have relative URLs, which means that whenever you're linking to somewhere from your site in the code, it will automatically link to the HTTPS variant of that URL, because it's not in line with best practice to link the HTTP from HTTPS variant.
Okay, makes sense. How long do you believe it's possible to come back after migration's gone wrong? Or how long do you have to recover?
How long do you have to recover? How long do you have to recover? I think that's an interesting question, because I think that you should spot the performance drops as quickly as possible, and try and recover by just changing the things that you can see that have gone wrong. In terms of how long you have to recover, I think some of the time constraints can be around, as you saw with ASOS, can be around when Google releases an update. So potentially you can make all of these changes, but they might not be realized until a core update occurs when you suddenly get a large boost. So I would say if you're making changes and you're not seeing immediate performance uplift, don't be too concerned. Well, be concerned, but you might see performance uplift when a core update's released. I think that answers that question.
Yeah, fantastic. Joe's here. I think that means we've run out of time.
I just want to say thank you, Tom. That was really interesting. And I also wanted to say to everyone that the presentations are being recorded, so you are being filmed. And I want to ask you if you are able to share your slides afterwards when we do a post-event email.
Yeah, perfect. That sounds good. Can do that.
Great. And thank you very much to Tom and to Found for being our sponsors for the 10th birthday party. Tom will be at the speakers table as well after, so please continue the conversation there. And we will be back here in this type of format at 6:15. So please network, get yourselves a drink, maybe a piece of cake or something like that. And we'll be back here in about 20 minutes.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much. I'll see you later. See you at the tables.
Tables.